It's time to get up with Clemson, or should I say, without Clemson. The defending champs not in the first four. What does that mean? We'll tell you right off the top. Plus, it's over for Cam in Carolina, at least for this year. What have we actually seen from this former MVP? Have we seen his last play in the NFL? We'll talk about it and what a start it was for a fabulous freshman last night. Highlights from a wild night at Madison Square Garden. All that and more in this hour of Get Up, starting right now. With my favorite thing that happens all year. The college football gods have just given us this gift, those of us who do sports talk. They just rank these teams and let us argue over it. Here are the first rankings last night. Ohio State is 1, LSU is 2, Alabama's 3, Penn State is 4. We talk about Ohio State. They're 3 in the AP poll, but for the first time ever, they're number 1 in the college football playoff rankings. They're the first Big Ten team to be ranked number 1. Penn State's not far behind. At number 4, the Nittany Lions in the top 4 for the first time. It's just the second time that 2 conferences comprise the top 4 teams, and that means the defending champs, as mentioned, Clemson, are on the outside at number 5. The playoff committee chairman is Rob Mullins. He spoke last night about the decision to put Penn State above Clemson.
When you look at Penn State's resume with wins over Michigan and at Iowa, those are marquee wins. Then you look across, Penn State's been very consistent. I think they've held 7 of their 8 opponents to 13 points or less. So again, and Clemson's coming on and playing their best football, but after week 10, the committee felt that Penn State was a notch above. When you put the 2 resumes up and you get a chance to see, who everyone's playing, it's a factor because you're discussing every single game, whether they play an FCS opponent, what their non-conference looks like, how their conference is stacking up. So sure, it's a part of it because, the strength of their opponents is important.
So that's Rob Mullins. It's worth repeating that he is the athletic director at Oregon, for whatever that's worth. He recuses himself when they discuss Oregon. Oregon is number 7. But, Joey, what did you make of what we heard him say there?
It's interesting to me. If you believe in Penn State and you're saying you believe in their strength record, strength of schedule, then why stop at putting them above Clemson? Why not go above Alabama? Because clearly their numbers are also better when you look at strength record and strength of schedule.
Totally agree. I mean, that's what we said earlier this morning. And by the way, my one sheet is my favorite thing in the world. But, Paul, that's what we said this morning. The committee, they're a little devious because they do a little bit of this and then a little bit of that, which means they leave themselves open to do whatever they ultimately want.
Look, I've met Rob. He still reminds me of that ambassador to Ukraine who's caught up in all this quid pro quo stuff.
Yes.
I don't
Thanks for bringing that up.
I don't know what to believe with these people because, first of all, it's not going to be the same next week. Alabama, LSU winners number 1. Penn State, you're right, should be. Clemson, Joey thinks they should be the defending champ. Yeah. This is not boxing, Joey.
It could turn into boxing.
It could. I tell you what, it is going to if LSU loses again. I mean, I know we're getting off the subject, but I'm feeling sorry for this guy.
Here's the thing. All kidding aside, to sort of try and bring this back to some semblance of sanity, here's where it's inconsistent. Right. If you're going to put Ohio State ahead of LSU, you're doing that on the eye test because LSU has better wins. But you're then going to put Penn State behind Alabama. Penn State has better wins. Some of these things just don't work together.
Well, they're leaving themselves wiggle room because they understand these top 4 teams, they have to play each other. Yeah. So at some point, 2 of those teams will lose. And if you're Clemson, now you get to move up. But you can say they don't have quality wins, and you can get on TV and say you did it that way for that reason, but it doesn't match the rest of your top 4.
You remember, in 2014, Ohio State was 14th in the first poll. They won the national champ. So these things will change. Probably not that dramatically, but there's going to be a lot of movement. As Joey said, they're playing each other, they're cannibalizing each other. But the fact that the 2 power conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, are up.
That's the year that Ohio State, that they wound up doing it with Cardale Jones. But bear in mind, they needed people to lose in front of them. Last year, we had 3 unbeatens go in. Clemson's going to go in unbeaten. The Big Ten champ and the SEC champ may wind up going in unbeaten. It's going to be very hard for teams to vault from back in the field this time.
And we say that every year, though, and we've said it even in 2014. It's going to be hard for a team to get there. And that's why when you look at where the Pac-12 is sitting there with 2 teams inside the top 10, what Ohio State did in 2014, they played Wisconsin and blew them out. They made a statement on that final Saturday that the committee just couldn't ignore, and the Pac-12 will have the same chance to do that.
And we're forgetting about a team, Minnesota.
Yes.
I mean, Minnesota controls its own destiny. Now,
Come on, Paul.
The odds of them getting in are
do you believe what you're saying,
are infinitesimal, but
If they get those 2 big wins, though, that they would need to be undefeated.
Yeah, we know
need
this.
to win the
Do
big.
you believe they can?
Well, that's
I
not
do
the
not.
point.
That's not the point. What we're saying
They have a
is
chance.
it's possible.
Let's explain quickly
it's
what we're
possible.
talking about. Minnesota is an unbeaten team right now in the Big Ten West. They play Penn State this weekend, and in theory, they would get a shot at unbeaten Ohio State at the end if that's the way it plays out. If they were to win those 2 games, of course, they would wind up in the college football playoff, but they're an awful long way from that. Quickly, as far as LSU is concerned, and we had Coach O on, and again, between you and Marcus, you guys are so fired up for this weekend. Are you satisfied with where they are, or do you believe they should be number 1?
I believe they deserve to be number 1.
So
if
did
we're
I.
looking at the merits of the teams this year and the games they've won, the people they have beaten, they should be number 1 right now in the initial ranking.
I agree.
It's simple. Go do something you haven't done in about
And we're about
100
to.
years.
Well, we're about to.
I
You
get
don't worry
that.
about it. We'll talk about it on
Just go to
Wednesday.
Tuscaloosa and win
And
the
we're
game.
going to do it.
I fully understand.
That's what we got the last one.
That's what sits there. But, I mean, at the end of the day, their strength of record is number 1 in the
Yeah,
country.
if you're saying that the reason Penn State is above Clemson, a defending champion, is because of their resume, I believe that LSU has the
That's why
best
people
resume
don't
in the
trust
country.
the committee. They make no sense.
That's exactly what I meant when I said they do a little of this and a little of that. So in the end, they can do whatever they
They're
want.
bureaucrats, Greeny. That's why.
Okay, we have more college football coming. Let's get to the NFL next. Get Dominique back over here. We'll talk about the Cowboys. They return to practice today on a short week after they beat the Giants Monday night. Dallas faces a much tougher test this weekend when they host Kirk Cousins and the Vikings on Sunday Night Football. This will be the 5th meeting between Cousins and Dak Prescott as NFL starters. Dak has been on the winning side of each of the previous 4. He's won the last 2 by an average margin of 19 points. And we've talked, my goodness, it feels like we've talked an awful lot about Dak Prescott on this show, but not with Joey Galloway. So we wanted to keep you here for this part of the
appreciate that.
When you watch him play, and you're a former Cowboy yourself, when you watch him play right now with Zeke behind him and Amari and that offensive line, what do you see right now in Dak Prescott?
I see a pretty good quarterback that's getting better. I don't feel like a guy has to be, he has to win games by himself to be a good quarterback. Any quarterback in the NFL and anywhere else in football is better when they have a good run game. And that's the same with Dak Prescott. When Dallas is able to run the ball with Zeke Elliott and he's on the field, and that's what we talked about before when we talked about what kind of leverage does Zeke have, it's because Dallas wanted to win, and that's why he could hold out, because they understand they need Zeke on the field to win games, and Dak needs Zeke to win games.
As we look at this game between these 2 NFC contenders, and they're very similar teams, right?
Yes.
They have big-name receivers, big-name running backs. Right now, Kirk Cousins for Dak Prescott straight up. Which team doesn't do it?
Neither does it. I believe both teams stand pat. I don't believe that if you're in Minnesota and you're Mike Zimmer and you look at what Kirk Cousins has been over the last 3 of the last 4 games, you say, I need Dak Prescott. I don't believe that's a guy you trade Kirk for straight up. And I know Dominique's going to feel differently.
Oh, yeah.
But we've seen Kirk be exceptional. You've seen Kirk be great and just as good as Dak has ever been at the top of his game.
We've seen Kurt be great in some moments. We haven't seen him be great in big moments, which Dak does. And Himbo gave me a stat that made me feel even more strongly about Dak. If anybody wants Dak in this situation, in their losses this year, Dak's QBR has been 65. In the Vikings losses, Kurt has been 24. So Dak is good all the time. The fact that they're losing is Dak doesn't have the same defense, or their defense isn't performing to the level that the Vikings defense is. Dak needs help in that way, but I don't think that he's anywhere. I don't think Kurt is anywhere close to Dak Prescott as an NFL quarterback.
In your view, are either of these teams legitimate contenders in a jam-packed NFC where we have San Francisco and New Orleans and Green Bay and whomever else you like? Are either of these teams, in your mind, legitimate contenders to make a deep run?
Absolutely, and both teams are very talented. I don't see in the middle of a season a team that has jumped off the screen to me and I said, that's it, they're better than everyone else. And so when you look at the talent in Minnesota and in Dallas, both these teams are definitely in play.
You know what, when you look at it on paper, I feel that way, but when I watch the New Orleans Saints play with Teddy Bridgewater, or when I watch the San Francisco 49ers just get after people's keisters defensively, you say to yourself, you know what, that does look different. You might be scared to play this team, and things usually level out, but right now through the first half of the season, those two are a cut above in the NFC.
Yeah, you have to be exceptional at something to be a great NFL team. The 49ers, it's obvious what they're exceptional at. Now we need to talk about Cam Newton. His season has come to an end, but that brings with it more questions than answers. The Panthers have placed the former MVP on injured reserve as he continues to experience pain in his left foot. Cam aggravated a Liz Frank injury in a Week 2 loss to the Buccaneers. Since entering the NFL in 2011, Newton has been hit over 300 more times than any other quarterback in the league. That includes 8 hits in Week 2 against the Bucs, which some are projecting now to have been the final game for Cam Newton in a Panthers uniform. And look, the three of us, at least, have talked a lot about him, and you know my belief that you just cannot. You cannot allow a quarterback, I don't care how superhuman he looks, to get hit as much as he has and expect him to have a long career, which I think is unfair to these guys because quarterbacks can make $30 million a year when they're 38 years old if they're healthy, and he's not. So I would ask the question, do you think we've seen the last of Cam Newton in Carolina and maybe even beyond?
I believe we've seen the last in Carolina. I don't believe we've seen the last of Cam Newton in the NFL. There's going to be a team that feels like they are ready to win now, that are going to kick the tires on Cam Newton, see how healthy he is, and remember what he was in this league and what he can be. And I think teams are going to do that. If he's healthy, if he's ready to go, Cam Newton's a starting quarterback in this league.
Dominique, I'll give you a specific. The Chicago Bears, who are much maligned with their... Are they Cam Newton away from winning a Super Bowl?
I absolutely think they are. Cam Newton is that good, and they don't even need him to be top-level Cam. And the good, interesting thing is they don't have to change the offense that much because Mitchell Trubisky is a very poor, a destitute man's Cam Newton. They have similar skill sets, but they are nowhere near as good. I don't got all that time right now. I mean, I can use spell check and stuff.
Which Cam are you guys talking about, though? And so I don't think Cam Newton is done. I think the Cam Newton that we knew Cam Newton to be is done. We won't see that guy that could run around and take the hits that you're talking about. And so he's going to have to reinvent himself. And so if you're a football team, you can't view Cam Newton as the guy he was and say, that's the guy I want. You got to think of the Cam Newton that can't run the same and can't take the same hits.
You say that, but we do that for a lot of quarterbacks. We do that for a lot of quarterbacks who've never been as good as Cam Newton. Joe Flacco gets a job in Denver after he's only been good for one run.
But he's not an athletic
the point is, you don't have to go back that far. You don't have to go back that far.
You go back to the beginning of last season. He was in the MVP conversation.
When you're talking about an older quarterback that's taking the hits that he has taken, that he just put up there, the hits are the age. And you know this. You only have so many hits in your body. And so you can go back 2 games, and if a guy is hurt from getting hit, guys don't come back from that.
And look, let's be clear. I don't think anyone looked at Joe Flacco and said, oh, he brings you a championship. That's not what we're talking. I'm not asking whether Cam will get a job. Someone will sign him. But no one looked at that and said, we're Joe Flacco away from winning a championship.
It's all about winning Super Bowls. So is anyone going to sit here at this table and say that the Chicago Bears have a better chance of winning a Super Bowl with a fully healthy Mitch Trubisky or Cam Newton at whatever state he is in next year? If you think that Cam Newton does not give them a better chance, you have not been watching professional football.
Yeah, but we've been watching Cam Newton hurt. And so I'm saying we don't know what that Cam Newton is when he comes back.
And that is the reason, though, you discuss it, you kick the tires, you figure out where he is from a health perspective, and you hope you get the guy that played the first 8 games last year.
You do agree that he won't come back to what he was,
I mean, if you could get Teddy Bridgewater, I would say you go with Teddy Bridgewater. But who else is
a younger version?
I know. Who else is out there? There's no one else who gives you a better chance. So
you do agree that Cam will not come back to the Cam we knew Cam to be,
Cam will be different.
Okay.
Cam will be different. But different doesn't necessarily mean worse.
Doesn't mean worse, but it does mean he has to reinvent himself.
The bottom line is he's 3, 4, 5 times better at whatever condition than Mitchell Trubisky.
With 1 foot, no matter if he brings the other foot with him.
Have you watched these Bears football games?
I have.
Fair enough, but I don't think that if I'm Cam Newton, I'm sitting here thinking, oh, thank goodness they think I'm better than Mitch Trubisky. So I guess the question I would ask you is, in baseball sometimes they'd say a pitcher loses a few miles an hour off his fastball, but he goes to something else. He has other ways to beat you. Does Cam have that? Does he have other ways to beat you?
I'm not sure that he does. I think Cam needs to be able to run to be an effective quarterback. I'm not going to go out here and say that Cam's going to transform himself into a pocket passer all the way, but I think he's good enough.
To me, Cam needs to continue to be mobile. He doesn't need to be a running quarterback. Since he Cam, we forget that Cam set records his rookie year passing the football. You give him the right people outside, he can do that.
I hope so. I hope we're able to see him again. In the meantime, let's run the hurry up here. I got a few more NFL questions for you guys. Kareem Hunt returning to the Browns this week. RC, does this give Cleveland some hope?
It doesn't matter. You can bring back Jim Brown, and I'm talking about primetime Jim Brown, and it doesn't help this team. This is a 2-6 team that has only won 2 games because they are bad. They are undisciplined. They don't make plays in the clutch, situational football moments, and I don't necessarily know how much of an upgrade he is over Nick Chubb.
He's not an upgrade. Nick Chubb is one of the best backs in the league.
Other note here, Doug Marrone announcing yesterday Nick Foles will regain his starting job from rookie Gardner Minshew. Super quick, Nick, is that the right call?
Yeah, absolutely. Gardner Minshew's been cute along the way, but he is not the guy you paid all this money to. You need to find out if what you paid Nick is worth paying him, and then maybe make a decision at the end of the year.
Minshew's a guy who maybe is somewhere else next year. And then finally, earlier in this hour, Jeremy Fowler told us the chances of Patrick Mahomes playing this weekend are trending up against Tennessee. RC, how important is it for Mahomes to come back this week?
It's extremely important because Mahomes is the guy, but it's not important enough to risk his health, to risk what you're going to do going forward. This organization is going to be very careful with Patrick Mahomes, so careful that Buckner refused to jump on him and hug him when he ran onto the field.
You better damn not touch him. More football as we go. Meanwhile, college basketball. Jay Will, let's go to the Garden last night.
Let's get it,
That's
Greeny.
number 2 Kentucky taking on number 1 Michigan State, which means Cassius Winston.
Cassius Winston plays a lot like Sam Cassell, that old school style in this game. Really good at pick and rolls.
He was the only unanimous preseason All-American. He's showing off his whole game there. We were tied early, and then Tyrese Maxey for Kentucky came off the bench.
And Tyrese Maxey came off the bench for 26 points, did a great job leading this team. Only had 1 turnover. Did a great job of turning the corner and going down.
It is tough. Again, he's coming off the bench. He was the number 13 recruit in the country. Winston had 11 at the half. Maxey had 12. Excuse me, Winston had 12 at the half. Maxey had 11. Kentucky led by 10. Under 5 minutes to go, Michigan State trying to work their way back into the game. That's Cassius Winston plus the foul. So it's a 2-point game. He would finish with 21, but in the end, it was Maxey.
Maxey, this team is going to be number 1 team in the country when the polls come out on Monday. Michigan State, not the same team without Joshua Langford playing.
He scored 26 off the bench, and Dickie V was fired up.
Are you serious? Are you serious? Come on, Maxey. You're a freshman. This is your first game. Are you for real? Oh, man. Look at that smile. Mr. Calipari, you got a star.
Hashtag BBN, big win last night for Kentucky. That was one of the 2 monster games of the Garden last night. How about the other? Number 3 Kansas taking on number 4 Duke. And look who's in attendance watching this game. Everyone get excited. Look, it's going to be...
You got Tom Thibodeau, you got Kevin
Tom
Durant,
Thibodeau.
KD.
Who's that sitting next to him?
That's a good friend.
Oh, yeah. All right, Kansas had 18 turnovers in the first half. We pick it up in the second, and you see them knocking down shots there. Kansas get themselves right back in the game. So we got a 14-4 Kansas run. We got a good game in the second half. And you know what took over? Duke's defense.
They forced 20-plus turnovers, and this is who Duke needs to be this year. Cassius Stanley, a big-time vertical, higher vertical than Zion Williamson from last year, by the way.
Duke had fallen behind, but now they're leading, and they're running the floor.
20-plus turnovers. This is what Duke basketball needs to be this year. They're not great offensively, but they could be great defensively.
Now, here's your ball game. 13 seconds ago, Kansas is down 3, so you need to shoot a 3, right? You need to shoot a 3, right? Hold on a minute. Well, if you're going to make it, you got to at least make it, right? Okay, nothing. Nothing winds up going. Kansas, some questionable shot selection down the stretch, and in the end, it's Duke that winds up winning last night. So we have Kentucky and Duke. What else is new in college basketball? But really good night to start the college basketball season at the Garden. So I would ask you, with the 4 huge teams playing last night, did we see the number 1 pick in the draft last night? The ping pong balls are going to fall. Who was the guy on the floor last night?
Nobody. We didn't see number 1, number 2, number 3.
Really? Who's number 1?
I would say right now it's trending towards potentially LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball, or you have guys like James Wiseman who plays over at Memphis.
Yeah.
There's a couple people in this conversation. James Wiseman over at Memphis. This guy's 7'1", has great inside-outside game. And then you got a guy named Anthony Edwards who plays for Georgia. He's like a 6'4" combo guard. People remind him of Donovan Mitchell. And then LaMelo Ball. When I saw LaMelo Ball a couple of years ago, he was 6'1". He's 6'7" now, Greeny. He's a 6'7" guard. Now, his shooting form is a little bit different, and people are questioning that. But LaMelo Ball is in the conversation for being the first pick in the NBA draft.
That is really interesting to me, and I'm guessing is to a lot of people. In a year where we don't have the kind of high-profile players in college basketball that we did last year, obviously, with Zion Williamson being at the top of that list and not the only one. LaMelo Ball is a name everybody knows. Let's say that again. He's 6'7" now. He sort of disappeared from view for quite some time.
Not really. I mean, a lot of his games are being streamed. So people are watching his games internet-wise, and they're getting high viewership. So when you got guys like him going overseas, you got guys like R.J. Hampton going overseas.
Yes.
The game is changing. No longer do players feel like they need to use the collegiate level as a platform to ascend to the NBA.
I did see that game where he played against R.J. Hampton.
Yes.
And they're playing in Australia. Hampton announced that decision here on this show. Okay, so, we need to talk more about that. LaMelo Ball potentially being the number 1 pick in the draft. You want to talk about something that would be fascinating. But first, I want you to see this story. My favorite athlete of all time right this second. Let's take a moment here and celebrate Texas guard Andrew Jones. He missed all but 2 games last season battling leukemia. He returned to the court last night in a big way, scored a career-high 20 points in a win over Northern Colorado.
Greeny, I did an interview with him last year. I sat down with him, and obviously when you go through a life-changing, altering scenario like that, battling leukemia, to see him be back on the court, to see him learn how to walk again, this kid is a walking miracle. He's a walking miracle, and you couldn't be happier for him and his family and the entire team.
My goodness. I mean, you think about what he's been through. The reaction on social media last night.
Incredible.
Was phenomenal. All right, much more coming here as we continue on Get Up, including this. Tua or Burrow? Who will be better on Saturday? Who will be better in the NFL? Answers to both of those questions coming up. And